Hello, a very warm welcome to today's webinar and good afternoon to everyone. And today's webinar is about use simulation to power innovation in life sciences. So before we start our webinar, I would like to give you a quick introduction on EDS technologies and our association with Dassault Systems. So EDS Technologies is the largest engineering and enterprise solution provider in India. With over 2 decades of experience in various industries, we enable companies in aerospace, automotive, supply chains, high-tech electronics, railways, consumer goods package, engineering service providers, defense and research verticals to achieve their business goals. EDS Technologies is established in 1995 and is headquartered in Bengaluru. Along with Bengaluru location, the company operates with its direct presence in India about in 11 other cities including Chennai, Coimbatore, Chandigarh, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, Kolkata, Noida, Ahmedabad and Nagpur. It has largest customer base in Indian market in PLM, ERP and visual simulation business and has successfully partnered with more than 1500 customers in various industry verticals. We have a long association with the Dassault Systems and we are their platinum partners. In the partnership with Dassault, we help you to create unique and disruptive innovations thanks to a rich portfolio of industry solution experiences, which is unique to each industry leveraging products such as Ketia, Similia, Delmia, Innovia. Today, to present this webinar to us, we have Mr. Sridhar from EDS Technologies to talk on the same. Sridhar is specialized in the field of finite element based simulation for more than 9 years. His professional interests lie in structural integrity, fatigue, and durability analysis. His current role at EDS enables him to work closely with customers in helping them approach problem solving using similar products. He is also involved in customer trainings as well. He would be taking us through the webinar today, and if you have any queries, please post them in the chat box whenever you have one. We would be addressing them at the end of the session. Please raise your hand or leave a message in the chat box if you have any technical difficulties. Thank you, and over to Sridhar.
Yeah, thank you, Archana. Welcome to today's webinar about using simulation to power innovation in life sciences. As the life expectancies grow steadily, people are demanding much more active lifestyles, and they are no longer satisfied with the medical solutions that require them to cut back on the activities significantly. Pictured on the above is a 93-year-old woman who is taking up skydiving for the first time. And a picture on the bottom is the life expectancies for the babies in the US. So this presents tremendous opportunities for life sciences industry with demand for medical devices and a treatment that would allow older patients to maintain the active lifestyle that they are used to. Rapid progress in science and technologies such as material sciences, electronics and mobile technologies enable researchers and engineers to develop more effective, safer and less medically invasive devices or therapies and procedures. As the emerging economy keep rising, greater portion of the population can now afford advanced medical care. Catering to the unique needs of these new market is going to be critical for the success of international as well as domestic medical device manufacturers. To compete in this growing market, companies have to be constantly innovating through in-house researches and development. Many of these applications, they have to do in-house R&D application of the latest academic research, or by acquiring different startup technologies. With the pressure from competition in the latest uh, healthcare reform, companies are under pressure to be fast in the market of new devices, or to mainly to benefit from bigger margin, and also to continuously reduce the cost of the devices. And also they'll also strive to increase the device performance. As a tightly regulated industries, faster approval from multiple geographical regions allow the companies to take advantage of the global market to ensure successful clinical trials and reduce costly recalls. Companies need to mitigate these risks during the entire life cycle of the product. All the industry challenges and demands, these mainly call for like shorter time to market, more competitive products, and also lower product costs. A realistic simulation can play a significant role in achieving these goals. To try to understand uh, this more effectively, and the uh, device safety, and the simulation, so mainly simulation can help design exploration by changing the material choices and geometries, and also manufacturing tolerances to predict the device's durability, reliability, and also potential failure due to fatigue. All these to reduce the risk of device failures in patients, patient-specific simulation can be implemented by using a realistic patient geometries and realistic loading condition, and all of this can be achieved by realistic simulation and durability evaluation. Simulia has a large footprint in the medical devices industry, with more than 100 commercial customers that cover mainly various segments within the medical device industries, including but not limited to cardiovascular, orthopedic, drug delivery, vision care, hearing care, surgical equipment, dental, pharmaceutical, medical imaging, as well as wound management. Today we are going to talk about stent design optimization, and I will show you a workflow developed for this particular specific process. A design of new coronary stent in all consideration of various performance is critical, including radial stiffness, durability, crimpability of the material, and also manufacturing choices, and many other factors. So as it is time consuming and expensive to evaluate and optimize a stent design by means of prototyping and physical testing, a computer simulation offer powerful technique to conduct virtual optimization of stent designs early during the stage of development itself. And this proof of concept work, uh, uh, a process for optimizing a representative coronary stent model through parametric as well as non-parametric approaches is demonstrated, and the evaluation of design and performance measure of these stents through optimization steps are also discussed here. So we start like So we also start with a few of the methods about how to create a stent model to perform a stress analysis and to perform a parametric design optimization in which we can change the geometric properties of the stent, such as like the length of the strut, the width of the strut, or the radius of the strut geometry. Then we will also talk about non-parametric design optimization, in which we are going to show how the shape of the stent structure itself we can change by non-parametric design optimization tool. And finally, we will begin to talk about the reliability analysis, and which we are going to show how effective the stent is when it is applied in a range of population in which the size of the coronary artery uh, of the stent may change from one person to one another person. So before we go into the details of each of these four sections, what I talked in my earlier slide, let's talk very briefly about what coronary stent is and how it is applied in the artery. So coronary stent is a device to treat a plaque buildup in the arteries. And as you can see in this particular image, it's inserted using a catheter into an artery. And there is a balloon that goes inside the stent. And once the balloon is at this point where the plaque is pulled up, so the balloon is expanded so that the stent expands and it pushes the plaque in, and also it will attach to the wall of the artery. So once the stent has been applied, which is attached to the walls of the artery, balloon is then collapsed and then removed from the artery. And then you will finally end up with a deployed stent. And after that, as the blood flows through the arteries, cyclic loading of pressures, mainly blood pressure, is applied on the arteries as well as the stent over the life of the person. So now we'll go into the details of stress analysis section and talk about how the model was built for Stent, and how the analysis was set up. So we will start by creating a 2D sketch of the Stent component. So here we will see you can see a U-shaped strut and a connector component in here. All the geometric features of the 2D sketch here have been parameterized. So this particular U U-shaped strut and the connector element you can see, which we have done through parameterization. All the geometric features of this particular 2D sketch here have been parameterized such that the length of the strut and the radius of the strut and also the thickness of the strut is rightly defined. Once we have the 2D geometry, it's kind of a repeatedly, it is repeated multiple times to achieve this 2D shape of the strut. Instead of doing the individual modeling, we can repeat it. So once we have the 2D geometry, it's meshed, and the meshing part was done in Abacus CA itself. Uh, so the geometry was created and then imported inside Abacus CA. Then the 2D mesh is created inside the Abacus CA, and this 2D mesh is then extruded. And as you can see, it has become a three-dimensional mesh. Once we have the three-dimensional mesh, uh, complete mesh of the stent, it's wrapped into a three-dimensional mesh to create a 3D meshed stent part inside Abacus CAE. That's what you can see on the rightmost image. So once we have a wrapped mesh for the 3D stent, you can proceed with the setting up of the model for the analysis. So further, there are multiple components. The stent itself was modeled using stainless steel, as you can see on the left-hand side, where you can see a stress strain graph for the material properties. The arteries is modeled as a solid cylinder, and this is like when it comes to material property, we have defined it as a anisotropic hyperelastic Holzapfel material. So basically, artery is modeled as a Holzapfel material using anisotropic hyperelastic material model. So you can see the bottom graph where you can see the stress strain curve, and also you can see the uh, material property that can be used to that is used, and it also matches very well with the experimental data. So this particular experimental data we had for this particular material of the artery. So apart from that, there are two more components here. Uh, that expansion and the crimping devices which will work. So which is a one of them is a solid cylinder and modeled as a rigid component that expands or contracts to implement either crimping of the stent or the expanding of the stent. So here is a detail of what stent deployment analysis includes. The first step is mainly crimping. Once the stent is manufactured, it is crimped. That is mainly it is compressed so that it can fit inside the catheter. Uh, the same I have shown earlier also, and this particular catheter will be inserted inside the artery. Before it can be deployed, it needs to be compressed so that it can fit inside the catheter, so it becomes smaller. In the next stage is it is the expansion stage, and the attachment in which you can see the white component here is a balloon which will expand, and as it comes in contact with the stent component, it will expand. And then once a stent starts to touch the vessel, it kind of deforms the vessel a little bit and attaches to the artery. On the bottom here, you can see the results of the von Mises stresses on the stent. On the right-hand side, you can see how the blood pressure loading is applied and how it results in the stress in the stent. So once a stent is deployed into the artery, the blood starts to flow, and as a cyclic blood pressure is applied to the internal wall of the arteries, and that pressure is also applied on the stent. You can see here on screen that initially the loading is monotonically built up, and then pressure is applied like in a cyclic manner. So this also leads to the stress which is shown in this particular graph as the maximum stress in the stent, and as you can see, pressure increases and decreases. Stress also goes through the same cyclical pattern. And because of this cyclical pattern, mainly like stress and strain is undergoing this particular cyclic pattern, the fatigue life of the stent can also be estimated. The fatigue life estimation using Isight tool is discussed in this particular slide. And the material which was used is 316 stainless steel with the ultimate tensile strength. The algorithm used for estimating the fatigue life was Brown-Miller with the critical plane method, for which Gerber fatigue reserve factor was computed using these equations, which is shown on screen. And estimated infinite life estimates for 2e power 9 half life cycles, which is approximately 20 years equivalent, was also studied. The contour plot on the top right shows fatigue reserve factor, and the regions highlighted uh, in the red mainly shows the area for which the fatigue factor is the worst. That's a component that is most likely to fail or has the lowest life cycle estimate. In this graph showing the stresses and strain curve for all these nodes and elements of the stress stent, as you can see, the strain is comparatively lesser, but when it comes to stress, it is kind of distributed between the negative as well as positive direction. That means some part of the stent are in compression and some are in extension. And because of this very nature of the stresses, in which some are in compression as well as other are in tension, it will lead to a fatigue failure of the stent. So now, next we are going to study about how to optimize the shape of the stent. That is mainly like we'll be talking mainly on parametric optimization, or like geometric parameters of the stent, like length or shape or the thickness, how we can change to get the better design. So let's talk a little more in detail about the parametric design optimization. It was done using Isight design of experimental tool. So Isight is a process automation and optimization tool from Simulia. And for this case, a design of experiment was conducted or set up in which a parameter from design of experiment are like length of the strut, or like radius of the strut, or even the thickness of the strut. The component of the workflow is included, and we can start with modifying the stent model, in which we modified the 2D geometry of the stent in the CAD package, and then from those 2D geometry, the 3D mesh is updated in the Abacus model, and a new input file is also generated. Then we run the Abacus analysis and store the maximum stresses that are being generated. So on the right hand side, you can see the results of the design of experiments. On the y-axis is the maximum on mysis stress in the stent. On the bottom two axis is the strut length that has been changed in the design of experiment, and another axis is the outer diameter of the U-shape here. A second graph also shows one axis which is like length again, but the other and another axis is part of thickness, or the extruded thickness of the stent itself. So we want to look at the areas for which the stresses are minimum, and those are the kind of sweet spots for the design. So that means if you choose those design parameters, the maximum stress will be minimized in the stent. So the results of the design of experiment is that we come up with this particular design parameter, which is optimized parameters such that the maximum von Mises stresses is minimized in the stent. So this is how the shape of the stent looks like after the optimization, and how the shape has changed, so that this is what we started, like baseline model is the model what we started with, and the model what you can see on screen is the modified model from the DOE. So among all the values that we tested in the design of experiment, this is the most optimized value that are like parameters for which the stresses are the least or the most like a minimum stress. As you can see, in the optimized geometry, the length is slightly larger and the radius is slightly smaller. It's a little more clear if we superimpose the two geometries. You can clearly see here the length of the optimized stent is slightly longer and radius is slightly shorter. So what result does it have, and how do you quantify the changes in the performance of the stent after the geometry has been optimized? So in this particular contour plot, you can see the baseline von Mises stresses and some of the areas for which the stresses are peak or maximum stress. You can see in some of the regions where you can see the U shape. So after the optimization, we can notice that the stress has been reduced by nearly 5% in those two regions. The second factor that we want to look here is a fatigue hotspot. The same region where the stress was higher will also lead to the lowest fatigue factor, and those are the two regions for which the fatigue factors are the lowest. And after the DOE study, like you can see that optimized stent will lead to 8% improvement in the worst factor. That means the worst factor has improved by around 8% in these two regions which is highlighted. And let's say like initially it was 1.2 and like it has improved slightly to a larger value. So so far we have talked about how to set up the stress analysis for the stent crimping and deployment. And we also talked about the parametric design and to do a design of experiment study, and about like how to change the geometric features of the stent model. Now we are going to talk about the non-parametric design optimization, in which like we can change the shape of the stent itself. So like we can slightly change the shape of the stent in a non-parametric way here. Let us try to go in detail about that. Now, the non-parametric design optimization was conducted in Tosca, basically Tosca structure, in which the design areas were specified by picking up the nodes. So we have picked up the nodes where we saw the maximum stresses and the maximum fatigue hotspots, fatigue area wherever we have observed. For the design optimization, we specified the nodes that like mainly like we have to pick up those nodes. So here you can see the highlighted nodes in the red, which is like allowed to deform. The objective of all of this optimization is to minimize the maximum von Mises stress, considering all the load cases, including crimping and also the stent deployment, and also pressure loading and blood pressure we need to apply. And approach is to mainly harmonize the von Mises stress distribution so that the maximum stresses is reduced. Some geometrical restriction are also applied so that its manufacturability it is manufacturable, and it has a cyclic symmetry. Cyclic symmetry is also assumed, just like how we have done in other cases. Here you can see the results of shape optimization. On the left hand side here, you'd see how the nodes are shifted. So if you focus on this U-shaped region, like you can see some of the nodes shifting inwards, and as you would see, the nodes are shifted. The stresses or the fatigue factor in those two regions are also improving. So you can see that in the right hand side, in a slightly better way, like you'll be better for a slightly better understanding the curve, uh, like how maximum stresses are changing over a time over multiple iteration. It all starts from 380 maximum stress of 380 MPa, and that also mainly in that U-shape region. And you can see that the same in the red color in the contour plot. And you as you can go through the iterations over 5 or 6 iterations, the stress has been reduced from 360 to 380 to 320, and it's about nearly like 13% reduction in the maximum von Mises stresses. So now, in the previous step, we talked about how the shape of the stand changes due to the parametric optimization, like by changing the length or the radius or the stent geometry. Now we see how the shape optimization results will change the shape. So here you can see the lines are no longer straight. You can see more contour, uh, like more contour onto the like a straight part of the strut here, and also deformation in the U part of the strut also you can observe. And it is very clearly visible that we do not have any kind of straight lines on this part. So we are also going to look at the fatigue hotspot as well as stress factors here. So like let us see like how it leads to the overall stress and the fatigue factor. So when we did the parametric optimization, it had led us to 5% reduction in the stress peaks, and doing the shape optimization, it will lead to 14% reduction in the maximum stress if we compare it with the initial stress value, that is like baseline design. Uh, so like so that this means like over 2 steps, that is my like parametric optimization will lead to 5%, and then when you are doing a shape optimization, that is non-parametric optimization, it gives a further improvement on the stress peaks. We are also going to look at fatigue hotspot factors. So doing a parametric optimization led to a improvement of 8% worst fatigue factor, and using the shape optimization, we have reduced it by 14%. So we started with a fatigue shape factor from 1.2 in this region, wherever like which is highlighted, and we are ending up with 1.41 as the worst fatigue reserve factor, which is about 14% improvement in the FRF result. So I have shown you these results in 3D, and also wanted to show you in 2D. It's a little better to see how geometry changes in 2D. So we start with this baseline geometry of the stent component, and this is the parametric optimization model, like which is in the middle. So you do which has undergone design of experiment study and optimization, for which you can see the length is slightly longer and the radius is slightly smaller. And once we do the shape optimization, the shape has been changed quite a bit. The radial shape is slightly deformed, and it is also slightly pushed inwards, and the straight line and long straight line, you can see like it's kind of a more contoured in the those regions. And since we had applied geometry or like cyclic symmetry, you would see that the two U-shaped structures are kind of very similar. So now that we have talked about parametric design, non-parametric design optimization, let us finally talk about like finally we also need to test that for reliability. So why we want to test the reliability of the stent is mainly because the same stent will be deployed in a range of population. So like for which the size of the arteries might be very different. So that's what we are going to test against that. So if we change the size of the arteries, how does the performance of the stent changes? So for reliability analysis, arteries are the largest source of uncertainties in our model. So what you're seeing on the right hand side in the red is the artery. How it is modeled using the like using mainly a cylindrical structure it is modeled, and the gray area what you are seeing is the stent, and the inner circle is the balloon. So which will be kind of expanded to deploy the stent onto the artery. So to conduct the reliability studies here, there are mainly two parameters. So that we will focus on inner radius as well as outer radius of the artery. By this way, we change the shape as well as the thickness of the artery. So we are trying nearly 2.5% variation for both the radii. We are going to keep the outer radii of 1.62 millimeter with the mean and 0.02784 mm as the standard deviation. And when it comes to inner radii, it is like 1.132 millimeter mean and 0.018 millimeter standard deviation. So how the reliability analysis is conducted is by using Isight. So this is the same tool once again which we have used, like earlier we had used it for a parametric study. So this is a process automation tool from Simulia. So different components are included inside the reliability as you start with the stent model, which is like changing the geometric parameters from the artery point of view. So here you can see the workflow. So initially, like it will undergo different changes in the stent model, and the same model will be taken for stress analysis, followed by a fatigue life calculation using FE analysis. We'll try to extract the worst life uh, worst life here, and the same will be considered for the DOE reliability. So this is the response surface. The response surface is that it will tell you how the fatigue factor changes the worst for factor changes. So as we change the inner radius and outer radius for its like how it is going to change. That is what you can see here. 2.5% range plus and minus, and then once we have the response surface, we conduct we use mainly it as a approximation tool in which like equations are like it will be fit, and so you can see in this graph on the y-axis a number of points. It will tell you how many points belong to what value and what radius. As you can see, like there is a very good bell-shaped curve, and this is the reliability results. So on what you would see is that for a lot of iterations, a lot of points by each point is a set of one value for inner radii as well as outer radii. For a lot of those, the worst factor does not change for most of those factors, and it is in the range of 1.4 to 1.1. So that means For the most of the changes in the radii, the worst fatigue factor does not change. So that again means the optimized stent model what we have come up with is very reliable for any changes in the artery dimension. That means that it's suitable for a different subject to like subject to subject variation in the population for the artery size. Okay, so to summarize, we have started showing you how to conduct a stress analysis for the crimping and deployment of the stent. We talked about parametric design as well as like design of experiment study to improve and reduce the stresses in the stent. And apparent design optimization is used and changed to for geometry. Once you have done the initial shape of the stent, how the length as well as width can be changed along with the thickness change is accommodated. Then we also talked about non-parametric optimization, which you can like you can see by how changing a slight changes in the shape of the stent in a non-parametric way, how it has improved the uh, fatigue factor as well as the stress improvement. And then finally, we have also talked about the reliability analysis, how to make sure that make sure to optimize the new stent that have been created, and it should also be a viable option across multiple subject population. So that means like for different like artery size, the same stent should work without any problem. So all these analysis we have done using Simulia products. Basically, like we have used Abacus for stress analysis. We have used FEC for fatigue simulation, and Isight has been used for parametric study as well as reliability analysis, and Tosca structure is used for non-parametric uh, design optimization. And all these four softwares have been tightly integrated to find the optimum design of the stent. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation, and we are open for questions now.
Thank you, Sridhar. And we welcome the questions. And Sridhar is here, and he'll be more than happy to answer all your queries. You can even write us to the mentioned email IDs, which are on the screen right now on your screens, which is info@edstechnologies.com, or to marketing desk directly at marketing@edstechnologies.com. We have series of these webinars on life sciences specially, and we are planning for a series of webinars in the coming 2 months mostly. So you can stay tuned to us on our social media channels, also on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would be sending you this recorded webinar video to your mail IDs, which you have registered with us right now, and you can access to it and then listen to the webinar anytime, or even share with your peers and colleagues. Yeah. Sridhar, we have received one question from Mr. Prashant Srirangam. If the shape of the stent is changed, is there any possibility of damage to the balloon?
No. See, like when we are talking about changing the shape, it is mainly to accommodate some of the changes with respect to stresses as well as fatigue. And we are not going to change the shape of this particular stent drastically. It is only a slight change in the shape which is just enough to get a improved stress as well as fatigue result. So it is not going to damage any, it is not going to cause any damage to the balloon. And further, if you are interested to study that effect also, we can study that during the analysis stage, because like after changing the shape of this stent, we are going to do a validation run as well. So during that validation, we can visualize whether it is coming in contact with the balloon and if there is any damage occurred in the balloon, that can be studied easily.
Okay, thank you, Sridhar. Sir, I think it has answered your question. And we have one more question from Miss Gayatri Nair. How do you perform model validation?
Yeah, when it comes to model validation point of view, we have to take help. We have to take help from uh, like experimental data for the final run, of course. See, the whole point of considering simulation here is to minimize the prototyping or testing. But when it comes to final stage, so we cannot completely eliminate the testing. So one final stage of testing is a mandatory. So we have to do testing in the final conclusion. So that's how we need to conclude whether whatever analysis we are going to do is correct or not.
Okay, we have one question from Mr. Jasmine Dalal. We have one question from Mr. Jasmine Dalal, that is, what should be the stress and strain ratio?
Okay. When it comes to stress and strain ratios, there is no fixed parameters as such that this should be the stress or this should be the strain ratio. It is purely based on your material usage. So for a particular material usage, you have to study the stresses and you need to conclude whether the stresses obtained is within the permissible limit or not.
Thank you, Sridhar. Mr. Jasmine, I think it has answered your query. If you have any other questions, please post them. I'll read it out for you. Miss Gayatri has one more question. It is, how do you determine inputs for fatigue life evaluation?
uh, Input in the sense, see, like when it comes to fatigue life, mainly it is a stress based fatigue analysis. So one of the inputs is mainly on your stress analysis, whatever you have studied, that is going to be your first input. Apart from that, the second input will be the loading cycle. So loading cycle is also straightforward. We have seen on screen, like whatever is the blood pressure coming on the stent, that is going to be your loading cycle. And third important material, third important input is going to be your material property. So your fatigue material property is a important parameter here. If you say if he's having its material library from where you can extract some of the material properties, fatigue material properties, and if you say he's also having uh, option of including your own material property, your own tested material property inside FESAFE database, which you can save and you can use it for your future use as well. So these are the three main inputs. Out of that, like material property or fatigue material property is one of the most critical input for any kind of fatigue analysis.
Okay. So we have one question from Mr. Prashant, who has asked us about the possibility of balloon damage of balloon. He has asked one more question, which is the software compliant with 21 CFR Part 11?
Regarding the compliance, we need to check. Actually, you can write us on this particular mail on this query. We will get back to you regarding this query.
And he's asking, can I use the software for a new alloy?
Yeah, when it comes to a new alloy, you have the option of choosing new alloy for this particular analysis. It is like when it comes to Abacus, it will take any kind of alloy material model for your analysis. But when it comes to your fatigue analysis, you should have the right material property. You have to do the testing, and if you have the material property on fatigue material property of this new alloy, you can always do this analysis using these tools.
Okay. Okay, we have two more questions from Miss Gayatri Nair. The first one is, I would like to know which experiment is preferred for model validation. Can you name the test?
Testing point of view, we need to get back to you. We can provide you a few of the papers where they have done the testing along with the simulation and they have compared the result. And we do not have the direct input, like which is the kind of testing what they have done, but we can connect you to the people who are into this kind of testing. So ultimately, like when it comes to simulation, we kind of study the end result only. So we will not concentrate much on the testing part. So what kind of testing need to be done, that you can get it through paper. We can share you those papers.
Okay, the second question from Miss Gayatri is, while performing fatigue material properties, what are the test conditions if we want to test the endurance limit?
Can you ask the question again?
The question from Miss Gayatri Nair is, while performing fatigue material properties, what are the test conditions if we want to test the endurance limit?
See, like when it comes to endurance limit, it is a standard fatigue testing what you have to perform, and you'll end up with any kind of endurance limit. So we are not talking anything out of the standards here. So standard fatigue testing only you have to perform to find out the endurance limit as well as any other fatigue material properties, and the same can be included inside FESAFE for your analysis. I hope I have answered your question.
Okay, she has one more question. Do you offer FEA services? Can you perform heart valve FEA?
So we are not into any kind of services. We are purely like uh, software providers, and but when it comes to Dassault system, they are into services. We can connect them to them. Like there is examples on Living Heart project which is available online, where like they have simulated the living heart. So that kind of analysis is done by Dassault system. So they do services on their own. And apart from that, we can also connect you to any other engineering service providers who are into this kind of analysis. But EDS Technologies is not into engineering services.
Okay, we have Mr. Rohit Banderi here. Can we determine force shortening of stent by means of this software? I mean,
Uh, I'm not very clear on this question because like we are not sure about any other software. Whatever you have mentioned, have not come across. We can get this checked actually.
okay. Mr. Neeraj Sharma has a question. How far we are deviating by modeling balloon as a rigid surface?
Uh, can you come again?
How far we are deviating by modeling balloon as a rigid surface?
Okay, we are not deviating much because like our main area of interest here is on the stent. So that is the reason why we have considered that as a rigid structure. If we are interested in studying balloon as a deformable structure, that also you can do it. So but it is going to take extra solution time. Since our area of interest is mainly concentrated on stent design, so we have assumed that as a rigid structure.
Okay, I think we have answered all your questions. All the questions which have been listed now have been answered. If you have any other queries, please note the email IDs which are there, or you can even write to us directly, because I have been sending you invitations. You can write to me directly also, or if you want Sridhar's email ID, maybe Sridhar.blr, I can send you his email ID. So thank you so much for your participation, and thank you so much for everything. And we'll be getting back to you for the next webinar invite as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.